Hello friends, this is Growl. Now that I've had a few weeks to test various corruption and builds, I wanted to make an updated corruption video to go over my exact plans and recommendations for Druid corruptions. I think corruption is a very open-ended system, and there definitely isn't a right or wrong answer. However, this is the most commonly asked question on my stream, so I wanted to articulate my thoughts into a video to help people understand what they should be aiming for. First, let's briefly go back over some of the corruptions and what my verdict is on them after testing. For starters, Expedient 3 and Masterful 3. These were expected to be strong, and they are strong. Getting huge amounts of raw stats is not only powerful, but very consistent. These are great corruptions to pick up and have available, both as a foundation for a build and just fill-ins to other builds. As expected, Masterful is slightly better for healing, but Expedient gives you the added benefit of helping your damage. Haste and Mastery work synergistically, so I believe the best setup is a mix of both rather than stacking just one. I ended up purchasing 4 of each. Next, let's talk about damage corruption. I've done testing over the last few weeks with all corruption options, and I'll go over my thoughts on them briefly. Mindflay was a solid choice for single target. It can be a bit unreliable at times, but overall does a strong amount of single target damage in a key. I think this will most likely be my damage corruption of choice if I'm looking to focus mainly on damage. I haven't grabbed one yet, but the next time it comes around, I plan on buying at least one piece of rank 3. Twilight Dev is my least favorite damage corruption. It does more overall damage, but the damage it does is spread evenly among mobs and is the weakest single target option. It also has the downside of pulling mobs that you aren't in combat with, so you always have to be thinking about where you're aiming it. I don't think I'll end up ever using Twilight Dev in a serious key. I have mixed thoughts on Gushing Wound. Per point of corruption, it's now similar to all other corruption options. The biggest problem, however, is that in order to get a large amount of corruption damage from this, you need to have 4 or 5 pieces all at high item level to corrupt, and this isn't always available to everyone. It's a great filler if you only need 30 or less corruption in your budget, but from switching gear around and playing, I've found that I'd rather use one single big corruption piece. I still plan on buying 2 or 3 of these when they come around on the vendor. Infinite Stars was a sleeper pick. I didn't expect it to be good, but it actually performed quite well in practice. The upside to Infinite Stars is that it procs off of all of your healing, so even in difficult trash pulls or bosses where you can't DPS much, it's doing well. Infinite Stars will perform highest during tyrannical weeks and long boss encounters, but falls behind Mindflay when it doesn't get opportunities to stack up. I think it's worth picking up an extra piece for experimenting. I bought a rank 3 for the purposes of testing, but I would only do that if you have extra echoes yourself. Let's put together some builds. I have 3 corruption setups in mind that I would recommend, that I will be using in different scenarios. Right now, you have 132 corruption available, as I wouldn't go above 40 because of Thing from Beyond. Let's break down the specific item sets that I plan on using. Setup 1 is Careful Carl. Carl is purely focused on keeping his team alive, and wants to be able to handle even very difficult boss fights and trash pulls. 3 Expedient 3s and 3 Masterful 3s. This build will give you the maximum healing output, so it's what I recommend for newer Resto Druids looking to build up score and a friends list of players to play with. This damage will be a bit lower, but in lower keys where damage isn't important, and in very high healing intensive keys, this will likely be the best build to run. Setup 2 is Savage Sheen. Sheen doesn't worry much about healing his team, either because he's in a dungeon or affix combo that doesn't require much healing, or because he's like one of the monkeys in my Twitch chat that runs Twilight Dev rank 6 and then tells me he doesn't know how to heal Kragmaw Tantrum on a 17 Underrot. 1 Mindflay 3, 1 Expedient 3, and 3 Gushing Wounds. This build will give you very high damage output, so when you need to meet very strict damage checks in high keys, or when you're just trying to beat the Boomkin in your group so that he rerolls to Hunter, this is the build to use. The biggest downside is that your healing will suffer from not having the haste and masterful amps. You can definitely get away with running this build in certain high keys, but it's definitely not recommended for all situations. Setup 3 is Balance Jimmy. Look, I felt like I had to keep the analogy going at this point, but spent way too long trying to figure out a word that started with J that would fit. Jimmy wants to do a bit of damage to help his team go quicker in the dungeon, but also wants to have enough healing power to deal with some of the harder bosses and trash pulls. 1 Mindflay 3, 1 Expedient 3, and 2 Masterful 3s. This build will give you a bit of both worlds. You aren't all in on one side, but you should still be able to put out a respectable amount of healing and damage when needed. This is great to run when you aren't sure what you need, or in general for high keys when you just need a little healing boost from your corruption but don't feel it's necessary to go all the way. Before I end the video, I want to address a few questions that might still be unanswered. What do you do with your extra corruption resistance that you'll get in the coming weeks? Probably more expedience for every setup, but I also want to try 2 Mindflay rank 3s in the high damage setup. It does depend on what you need, so you should have some extra Masterful, Expedient, and Gushing Wounds lying around to fill in your budget. What if I'm in love with Twilight Dev, or Infinite Stars, or I have a bunch of Gushing Wounds already? Do I have to switch to Mindflay? Honestly, no, it's fine to use whatever. All of the damage corruptions is so similar that you'll barely notice the difference. I would focus all of your echoes on Masterful and Expedient first, and only after you have all of what you need, then I would worry about trying different damage corruptions. What should I buy with extra echoes once I have all this stuff? It's probably good to buy some severe 3s for raiding, and an avoidance piece or two to fill in later if keys get that high that you start getting one-shot. Masterful and Expedient ones are also nice to have to fill in. This covers most of my thoughts on the corruption system and my plans going forward. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and remember that you can watch me live at twitch.tv/yummytv. Happy keying!